we all have a sense that we've taken this veil of forgetfulness, that we at one time knew about all of these mysteries and our true nature. But in order to survive on this planet, we've kind of dumbed ourselves down and crammed ourselves into one of these packages here. And we begin to identify with this as our true self and who we are and completely who we are. That's not true from the metaphysical and spiritual perspective. We're in a process of evolution. And if we can understand that process of evolution, we can better navigate this world, accept the preciousness of human life, and recognize that we're ultimately called to go somewhere else and to figure out how to get there. My first book was Junior Cosmic Egg, the children's book. And my first book in the extraterrestrial phenomena was called The Peacemaker and the Key of Life. Somehow along the way, I had become enamored by the staff of Moses. My research reveals that the serpent lifted by Moses is this serpent of Osiris. And he may even have been bringing forward an Atlantean technology. And it turns out, mythologically speaking, there's a whole prehistory of this staff, that Adam and Eve originally had this staff in the Garden of Eden, and then it was passed along through Adam's bloodline to Enoch and others that crossed over the time of the flood, and it was passed along to these various people, and they were often called the peacemaker. The peacemaker and the key of life are these reincarnating figures and how they become figures of prophecy and how they, the role that they play in their civilizations. And my first presentation at an ET-based conference was in Denver in 1996. It was Sitchin Study Days. I mean, he was like the great scribe, and I was like a student. And I felt like, okay, this feels really familiar, this role that we've had together. And it really was a special relationship that I had with Zechariah, and still admire him to this day. I've since learned that a lot of what he talked about doesn't hold the water that it did back in the earlier days. We know a lot more about Sumerian studies, the cuneiform tablets, and the Anunnaki now than we did then. But it was a real opening for me. And then I just kept going on. I ended up writing 18 books in and around the idea of extraterrestrials and the angelic realm. I was the first author to decode the Ascension symbolism in the dome of the U.S. Capitol. We're standing on the east side of the United States Capitol. Most people don't know that the United States Capitol is a temple. That is one of my kind of crowning achievements. I'll never forget the first time I went into the U.S. Capitol, into the architect of the Capitol's office, Dr. Barbara Wallinen. And she said, really happy to have you here. We know there's mysteries here. We don't know what they are. She gave me a lot of latitude, a lot of entry into the Capitol to just spend hours, as I did, like a jackrabbit, going in and out of all the halls and holes in the U.S. Capitol, and wrote a book called Freedom's Gate about the Ascension symbolism in the dome of the Capitol. Going to the Capitol, in the rotunda, there's a gold dot in the center of the rotunda, and I'd lay on my back and look up through that Stargate, and I would describe, look, the dome of the Capitol symbolizes the dome of our head. That gold dot is our pineal gland, and this is Washington going through the Stargate. The painter is Constantino Brumidi, who came from Italy in the early 1840s. And what we're actually looking at here is one of Brumidi's studies for the apotheosis of Washington. It means to deify, to raise from a man to a God-man, or to transform an ordinary human into a divine being. The U.S. Capitol was built during the Civil War. There was a question whether they were going to continue building it, and Abraham Lincoln said, no, we must finish the dome of the Capitol as a symbol of the unity of the nation. And for some reason, nobody really paid attention to what was going on up in the dome, where you have this gate of 72 stars with the founding father of the country, George Washington, sitting on a rainbow surrounded by celestial beings. The first time I looked at that, I'm like, That's a stargate. And this is Washington as Christ on the rainbow. And I'll never forget sitting down with Dr. Wallen and showing her a comparison of George Washington on the rainbow with Jesus on the rainbow in his resurrection body. And she's like, how come we've not seen this before? And it's like, well, I guess you got to look outside the box. You're not going to automatically look at George Washington and think he's the American Christ. But that is what that fresco in the dome of the U.S. Capitol very clearly states, that Washington is an ascended being. He's gone through the Stargate, and now he is equal to Christ. Very controversial thing to say and to talk about.